Okay, uh, in this, okay, in this lecture module, regulatory capture theory teaching module, the Bernie Madoff case. This was a famous case a number of years ago. It was a Ponzi scheme, like Social Security in the USA is a Ponzi scheme. It takes new money to pay off old investors, right? So using new investors' money to pay off old investors. That's a Ponzi scheme. Just like money is fungible, and the U.S. allegedly has a trust fund for Social Security, that's not true. Money's fungible. It's just inflows and outflows from the U.S. Treasury Department. The players are Congress and the SEC, and this has to do with the Hayekian knowledge problem and asymmetrical information, which leads to regulatory capture. So two important works here is the regulatory capture based on the knowledge problem, and then also an over-reliance on experts, which can cause social crisis. And of course, this is from the Hayek 1945 Use of Information in Society from the American Economic Review. So here, this is at the first 100 years of the publication of the American Economic Review. Hayek's paper was seen as one of the most important papers in the first 100 years of the American Economic Review. And this was the knowledge problem, and then the interventions caused the pretense of knowledge, and the interventions by regulators is also called the fatal conceit. And there's a collected works of Hayek. This was the first one. This was the last work he finished before he died. It's not sure if it's controversy whether he wrote it all or some of it was written by this person. Okay, so asymmetrical information. The SEC gives information to Congress. Congress, in turn, gives appropriated monies to the SEC because the SEC is seen as performing as a public good, protecting investors from themselves. So the way it would work is investors would give Madoff money, and then Madoff would then pay these investors money plus a rate of interest. Rate of interest. So obviously that in the securities market, in the financial markets, which are regulated by the SEC, the investors give Madoff money. Madoff then returns the investment, paying a rate of interest. And then Madoff would then report every quarter information to the SEC about his investment activities. And this, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was about 10 or 15 years that Madoff was continuing reporting above normal profits. And if you know anything about capital markets and investment theory, it's impossible to beat the market year after year after year. But nonetheless, Madoff would report to the SEC these above normal profits year after year after year, which, if you know anything about capital theory, is impossible to do. Nonetheless, the SEC, it turns out, after it all fell apart, that the SEC didn't even audit Madoff's bank accounts. So Madoff's reporting good news to the SEC. The SEC is reporting good news to Congress. the SEC is getting more and more money. The more people they regulate, the more government power grows, and the more people that the SEC commissioner employs, the more that they get reimbursed, the more salary they get, and the more power they have, and the more power you have, the better dinner parties you get invited to in Washington, D.C. Well, it turns out that, in fact, what was happening was that new investors were giving Madoff money, investments, and Madoff was then paying these above normal returns based on the new money, meanwhile putting money in overseas bank accounts, which was his own money. And this continued, his investors' money, hiding his investors' money in overseas bank accounts. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Labor union pension funds have overseas bank accounts as well. So this is what happens. Then finally, it turns out that it was his family. His family members told the SEC that Madoff was running this Ponzi scheme scam. And so what happens then is these investors the state paternalism, the investors are lulled to sleep. They no longer have the incentive to look out for their own self-interest because it's seen that the SEC is looking out for their own interests based on this reporting relationship. But it turns out the SEC doesn't have enough information to monitor it correctly. So then all these investors lose their money. So that completes this module on regulatory capture theory. Thank you.